I come from a family of doctors, a family where the status quo is fiercely apolitical, a family where the expected response is to simply smile and nod on the rare occasion that politics are even discussed. My family is one that fits the cookie-cutter image of doctors who are compassionate and empathetic, liberal even, yet believe in the antiquated saying that doctors should always be neutral. Additionally, I come from an oxymoron of a city, incredibly diverse but chooses to sweep delicate issues under the rug. A city that welcomes all cultures but encourages conformity. Growing up, my sister and I were taught to be kind and to feel for others. If someone drops something on the street, pick it up and give it back to them. Be grateful for what you have, because there are children in the world who don't even have enough food to survive. On the flip side, we were also taught not to comment on sensitive topics such as racism and sexism. At the time, I was a precocious child with a big mouth who was confused as to why I couldn't run my mouth to my heart's desire. As I grew older, though, I began to understand that the emphasis on remaining silent was a way our parents felt they could shield us from the harsher side of the world and prevent us from alienating ourselves in a society that I still believe wasn't particularly progressive. To place us in a bubble, if you will. So like any kid who just wanted to please people and fit in somehow, I followed along and I chose to accept the everyday discrimination as something that was unavoidable, unchangeable. I would listen to the arguments from both sides about race and gender and sexuality and class, but told myself to not form any of my own opinions, to remain neutral. In my pursuit of neutrality, however, I became passive. I lost belief in the power that we have as individuals to create change in the world, and started to think that maybe this is just the way the world works. Maybe there really isn't anything I can do. Amidst this all, there was always this other part of my brain that was like a raging storm of emotion in the carefully calibrated calm of logic. You see, I've always been someone who felt absolutely everything, especially when I was younger. Seriously, I think I cried constantly. I felt big emotions for myself and even bigger ones for others. But as a consequence of my rule-loving, system-following nature, I never let this part of myself dominate my mind. I learned to first act rationally and logically. I distinctly remember overhearing some derogatory comments made by a few middle-aged women that were aimed at a same-sex couple that I knew. Instead of speaking out for people that I knew, I filled my water bottle and I walked away. I was enraged, but it was almost as if I had conditioned myself to hold my tongue and put away my inner disapproval. Who was I to judge? This mindset of passive disagreement carried on digitally as well. I would avoid posts that were even the slightest bit controversial, staying clear of anything that my 14-year-old self deemed too political. Consequently, the algorithms used in social media presented me with posts and information that painted the world in an illusion of unicorns and rainbows, which only worked to reinforce the habits and behaviors that I already had. Later on, as I was fresh into drowning myself in IB psychology, I learned that these algorithms are a form of what social psychologists call gatekeeping. In a nutshell, a gatekeeper is a person, group of people, or automated algorithm that works to filter out information. In their most innocent form, these algorithms provide you with information that social media companies deem you would most enjoy seeing. However, the fact that they do this can have a negative and narrowing effect on your perspective. When you are constantly surrounded by information that simply verifies your existing beliefs and doesn't push you to see beyond your bubble, social media can become a source of confirmation bias and blind you to the realities and discriminations in the world. So fast forward a year or two to the end of 2019, and I had finally decided to embrace the part of my brain that was outraged at discrimination. I found my way into learning more about injustices around the world by taking a deep dive into gender inequality and sexism, and began to fully realize that there was so much more injustice happening both in bright daylight, but also in between the lines. It was this shift in my mindset that irreversibly changed the way social media affected my perspective. I remember YouTube kept recommending these videos to me from this channel called Jubilee, in the sea of sports videos that the algorithm usually gave me. So one day I decided to quench my curiosity and I watched one. It was part of their Middle Ground series, and that particular video was a discussion where people who were pro and anti-vaccine came together to put forth their perspectives. After 14 minutes and 20 seconds passed in the blink of an eye, I became nearly addicted to these videos. I always went into a video with a firm perspective of my own, so it wasn't that any of the videos changed my opinion on a particular subject. It was that they taught me to listen and to see something from the other side of the table. By listening to people who thought vastly differently than I did, I was able to flip my world upside down and better understand where other people were coming from, finding reason in their arguments as well. More importantly, it started to erase my trepidation of looking into injustices that don't necessarily affect me. And it forced me to see the fact that even injustices that don't affect me are my problem too. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. How could I want equality for myself, but not for the person next to me? Last summer, the power of social media reached an entirely new height. The Black Lives Matter movement confronted everyone with the harsh truth of systemic racism in American legal systems, healthcare systems, and in the country itself. Social media was at the root of the uproar and was a key platform in uniting the world and in helping people educate themselves. Additionally, it was instrumental in showing support because we will never understand without having lived the lives of the men and women who face racism every single day. But we can show solidarity and use the voices that we have to advocate for those who don't have a voice. The united front shown partly through social media and the pressure from that platform was the driving force behind real change and reform. I'll admit, the overly cautious mindset I had still lingers with me to this day. I had wanted to speak out against the still present discrimination against women in the workplace, or the violence against people of color in the US, but I saw the posts that were getting reposted time and time again on Instagram stories and thought, maybe this is too performative. I debated writing an article about the sexism that is weaved into Hong Kong culture and how in 2021, over 50% of employers still would not hire women with children, while the mentality that men make better leaders is ever present. But yet again, I doubted myself. I doubted whether I knew enough to voice my opinion, whether I was good enough at writing to articulate my thoughts, whether anyone would even read or care about what I had to say. However, this was the chance that I couldn't turn down. It saddens me that there are people I know to this day who have a perspective that is degrading and discriminatory to people who are different to them. So I'm standing here today asking you to broaden your horizons, to widen your perspective. Change is difficult. Self-reflection, recognizing discriminatory views in ourselves, calling out friends and family. Those are all incredibly hard to do. I get it. So let's take advantage of social media and take a risk to reboot our conscience. As they say, we are the leaders of tomorrow, but that's simply not enough anymore. We need to become the change makers of today, pushing change and progression. We need to have the tough conversations. It's simply not good enough to be not racist, not sexist, or not homophobic. We must become anti-racism, anti-sexism, and anti-homophobia. We have this incredible platform of social media that allows us to reach people in every corner of the world. A power that those before us didn't possess. So it's time to use that platform to burst the bubble. The world is watching. What are you going to do?